Let's see. There. All right. So we talked about segmentation strategies when they are pertaining to channels. And I thought I'd just kind of start off real quick and talk about how many ways we can find a product. So let's say we're looking for an HP printer. Let's just say it's going to be an inkjet printer. Tell me how many ways can we buy that? Examples.
Online.
Online. Yep, absolutely. Where else? Pardon?
Person, I gotta see.
Yeah, go to Staples. Good one. All right. Let's also put Walmart in there while we're at it. Anywhere else? Just Best Buy. There you go. All right. So we're over here, the end user, and because we're performing channel functions like ordering and finance and those kind of things, how many ways can we order these things from them? So online, we can order them online. We can go in person. We can get these online from their stores. We can go on Amazon, order them this way. Then, while we're at it, for delivery, we can have them delivered directly to our house. What other ways can we get it? Deliver it to the store. This is what's known, by the way, as BOPIS. I've heard it pronounced BOP or BOPIS, whatever you want to call it. It means buy online, pick up in store. Kind of the unique thing is that when 2019 came around, we've seen this slow disintermediation happening with retailing. So that in essence, retailing had a great concern that it was going to be played out, that it was not going to be valuable, important. And yet buy online, pick up in store was actually talked about as early as 2007, read about it. It just needed the right situations when consumers wanted to be able to make this happen. Interesting thing about buy online, pick up in store, the difficulty is that there's a 15% reduction in the profit, unfortunately, because it requires someone to be able to go into the store and put it in a different location. Got an idea how you would counter that? I'll give it to you. Okay. The way you counter it is consumers actually coming in the store. So while they're there, make sure that you give them some benefit for being able to be there. So you give them like a 20% discount coupon while they're there. So who knows, maybe they'll shop more. So there is a way to make it to your advantage. And like I said, there was at one time the thought that the physical location would basically go out in terms of an outlet for consumers to buy things. But is there something you could think of quite seriously that you wouldn't want to buy online? Cars is a great one. Yes. What else?
I said food.
Food. Yeah. You would want to look at the food. How about jewelry? I mean, there's a thing that we measure that is called the need to touch. We have the desire to have a visceral feel of whatever we're buying. It's not just simply enough for many of us to buy or look at a picture. I said this one class one time. I said, would someone want to buy a wedding dress without trying it on? And sure enough, there was someone in the class who bought a wedding dress online. So there goes that throw out. My wife, by the way, bought 4 wedding dresses. I'm not kidding. Okay. So apparently when she was going with wedding dresses, apparently you bought one for pictures. You bought one to get married in. You bought one that you could jump in a lake with. Apparently we never jumped in the lake. But she was also very price conscious, and she got nice dresses for what I consider to be a fairly reasonable price, because I know how much they can run into. But that's kind of the thing, I mean, there's certain things. 60% of electronics are bought online now. But less than 4% of jewelry is bought online for obvious reasons. We want to see what it looks like. All right. Jewelry is a transformative product. It changes us. We want to see what it looks like next to our skin. And so not everything will ever be bought online. And certainly food is one of those things. I mean, freshness is something that is desired. Even if we're going, fast food makes it there because COVID kind of pushed us in that direction. But is it something that we generally desire? Retail will always be there. There was a great marketing theorist called Roald Alderson who predicted that retail would still always be 90% of all sales. And the truth is that number still holds even with all of the online selling. So I just wanted to kind of pull that in just to give you, okay, Colin, I see you there. I'll make sure you're in. So we talked about the mixture of service outputs and how that mixture creates value. And so now what we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about how do we segment end users by user outputs. Okay. So you segment users, as I said before, not in the products they buy, but how they want to buy. And one of the things about the service outputs is to realize that it's not just like an on-off switch. We all have service outputs that we consider themselves to be more valuable than others. And so the example that they give here is that you can be very service and very price insensitive. Once again, price is not a service output, but it is what we give up in order to attain those things. And this is kind of an interesting example for me because I actually have a friend of mine I went to school with who was a tailor in New Orleans, who's a six-figure salary tailor. And this is exactly what he does. Albert Carroll, which is a custom tailor, they target buyer segments who have an extremely high demand for special. In other words, for them, time is of the essence. Money they got, time they don't. We've all facing, and I've talked about it before, the concept of time poverty. We have less and less time to be able to do the things that we wish. Much of that has to do with so many other distractions that we have. So I asked him one time how he got so successful, and I asked him how he got his customers to be such, He said, well, the first thing I do is I get their pants off. I went, excuse me. He says, the average tailor, the first thing that when any time you go into a tailor, the first thing that they'll say is, why don't you try that on? And immediately after they say, why don't you try that on? Then they start measuring the suit for your particular needs. By the way, I'm going to go dad on you here for a minute. Okay. If your parents ask you, what graduation gift you would want, I mean, other than a car, I mean, everybody would love that. If you want to give them a great idea that is a expensive thing, but reasonably priced, ask for a tailored suit. All right. Everyone deserves at least once in their life to wear something that was only made for them. All right. You deserve it. And especially when you go out there in the world and you're wanting to be able to show them just uniquely how special you are, deserve something that shows the best of you. So, all right, dad mode off. I just want you to note that because that's what I'm going to give my daughters when they eventually get out of college. I'm going to get my car. I'm kidding. They'll already have one. And it'll be a good one because my wife is not going to allow my children to drive what I drive. Okay, so what are the 3 steps for segmenting end users? So end users, because how we deliver is what is important, we make a list of all of the ways that we can deliver. We look at all of the service outputs that are desired by the end users. All of the possible lists. We don't worry about importance. This is just like when you're doing integrated marketing communications and you're coming up with ideas. There's no such thing as a bad idea. You wait to filter those later on, but you just generate a comprehensive list, no matter how small they might be, of ways of service outputs that consumers would consider desirable. Lots of information, lots of service, lots of support, pre-sale consultation, after-sale consultation, fast deliveries, all of those things, product variety, all of those ways of putting together. And so once you get the segments, all right, the service outputs, you start to develop segments of the group of buyers. You come up with a picture or a frame of those individuals. And so you come up with definitions of those particular groups. And the way you think of it is you think of those, you put together a list of those things that are maximally similar within a group. We call that collectively exhaustive. In other words, we paint as round and as perfect a picture of that unique group. And then what you do is make sure that they're maximally different between the groups. And we call this being mutually exclusive. And finally, we make sure that these differs in ways that matter to the system. And so if we're talking about an emergency good, all right, emergency tends to be the number one thing that kind of binds them together, but it may not be the way that we segment them because they kind of share. So they are collectively exhaustive, mutually exclusive. I grew up loving words. If you ever watch a movie, it's called The Professor and the Madman. And it is the story of the history of the making of the Oxford Dictionary. And it stars Sean Penn and Mel Gibson. What a weird combination. But it's a brilliant movie if you're in love with words like I am. And they talked about the journey of building and understanding the definitions and how difficult it is. They spent 3 years in defining the word art. Think about that. How do you define art? And so this is in the same way, the mission of trying to do these things. You define them. And then the last thing you do is you give them a name. The name is a description that fits those particular individuals based upon their characteristics. And so these are the 3 steps. You generate a list. You list those possible outcomes to segment the buyers by this, and then you name each segment. So generally, by the way, that if you were to do this and I were to do survey work, and I've done this several times, is what you would come up with is you would come up with a question like, how important is next day delivery? And you would use, I usually use a 7-point Likert scale. And on one side, it would say not at all, because I want to use words that are easy for people to use. And you would put very important on the other end. And then what you would do is you would have like a 7. And you would make them mark on that list, and then you would do the long-handled survey, you would collect the data, and then ultimately what you would do is you would use this to create the study. You use SPSS or any kind of software package, all right? They left this slide out. Here's a problem. The problem with this. What's the problem with a question like this? Which is important to you? Fast delivery, service, post-sale warranty, installation. What's the problem with a question like that? Yes, exactly. Exactly. You're saying the same thing, right? Yeah, it's the same thing. This is the difficulty with a question like this, is quite simply they would be very easily to be ranked all the same. So how do you solve this problem? You use what's known as a constant sum scale. Can't spell today. A constant sum scale. What a constant sum scale would make you do, and you've seen many of these before, is you would require you to put a number in here that defines its importance, and all of the numbers would have to equal 100. And so with a constant sum scale, you'd be able to kind of rank in here what each one of these is, and ultimately what you do create is a hierarchy. Constant sum scales are very important because they reflect the real world, all right? In the real world, you have limited resources, no matter how much money you have, and you have to prioritize which ones are more important than the others. And so, therefore, when you do the rankings, you have to come up with a way of ranking them in which is the most important. And so, ultimately, this is an example of one that was done by CDW. And this is a segmentation by service outputs, each one of these in a specific way. They do not say things like variety and assortment, but in a more explicit kind of language. And so we use an exploratory factor analysis. We put this stuff in. It's amazing stuff many times when you do research, because when you do research, these things break down in exactly in the way that you see here, all right? So they ran SPSS, they did an exploratory factor analysis, and they came up with 4 groups that are collectively exhaustive, mutually exclusive, unique to each other. Now, if you notice, as I have over here, the constant sum scale equals 100. These particular service outputs were picked. And then at the bottom, you see the percentage of respondents in the overall service sample. So let's say there were 400. You'd be able to say that from here, 16,3264 of them responded this way. So then you would have this group, 13%, full service relationship, which is 61%, and then references and credentials. All right, so let's kind of bury ourselves in the numbers. This is one of those things, by the way, folks, if you get into marketing research, of all of the business disciplines, marketing is probably, finance is extremely valuable. You do a lot of research, but a lot of the real artwork of, the digging in to see what the numbers mean, it's done a lot in marketing. So if those are your thing, you're in a good place. We can get software to try to tell us these things, but the software doesn't make second order calculations that mine can. So let's look at this first group. First group is named lowest total cost pre-sales info segment. So what does that mean? So the first thing that you notice is that the lowest price, 32% in the constant sum scale, 1/3 of what they consider important is all about the low price. The next is pre-sale information segment. So if you notice here, the double-digit numbers are in product demonstrations and trials, proactive advice and consulting, responsive assistance during the decision process, installation and training and support, but then after the sale, not that much. So what would I glom from this if I'm looking at this particular information? Well, what I'm looking at here is I probably got a group, just guessing, that has a pretty good IT department, that has individuals that are the problem solvers that generally aren't the IT people because they require more or greater information at the top end. So it says to me that the IT staff maybe can make recommendations, but they don't make the decisions. These are the kind of assumptions that you make while doing this. Might be right, might be wrong, but this is the way this is leaning to. So the fact that it's concerned about lowest price, once again, it means to me that the IT department does the recommendations because they just think the price is all that really matters. If it hits the specifications, it's okay. All right. But it also means I don't have to worry about it after the sale. And so this is 16%. Okay. Understand that group. The next is responsive support post-sales segment. And so now we kind of look into their double digits. They like product demonstrations as well. Lowest price, not that important. Installation and training, big. Responding to problem solving after the sale, big. Ongoing relationship to the supplier. Second order calculation, reflective learning thought. This is a group that doesn't have an ID department necessarily. They're fairly high on product demonstrations and trials and responsive assistance. Interesting, they don't really care about my financial stability, references or credentials. They don't really care that I'm a one-stop solution. So this is a group, once again, doesn't have an ID department. They're going to make the decisions and they're going to need help afterwards. Okay. So this group I would have to dedicate and have a high service department to be able to satisfy. They're almost opposite ends of each other. Full service relationship. I'm looking at this group because if I only looked at a single market segment in which to satisfy, I was only going to target with one group. This is 60%. So where are my double digits? A one-stop solution. Responsive assistance during the decision process, installation and training, responsive problem, ongoing, and also notice how even this is all the way through. It's either high single digits or double digits all the way down the list. This is a group that would require a high service as well. All right. And then last, which is kind of interesting, is references and credentials segment. So 25% of what they consider important is that my corporation has good references, that I'm financially stable, and that I demand or require product demonstrations, and that lowest price is important, but not necessarily so. What I read in is this is either a government organization or this is a satellite office of some larger corporation where the decisions are made somewhere else. where references and credentials and financial stability are more important than basically many of the other things, even responsiveness with the problem, it's saying to me, this is a small part of a bigger group. And what they're just making sure is that you're going to be around in case they have to throw something away. Okay, so anybody want to give me an idea and why you would select that group? No wrong answers. Which one would you take? Which one would you take?
I go full service because it's the majority of your respondents and they're not overly concerned about price. So they have good purchasing power.
Yeah, that's a great answer. And you're right, 61%. The key factor, whether I'm going to take that or not, is do I have the service department to be able to do that? Because my own personal resources are going to be important. If I've got it, that's the decision I want to make. You're right. Okay. Now, this is what I would also do. If I have the service department that can be able to work on this group, I'm going after this group as well, because this group needs the same things. And if my department can handle that, and I get both of these together, I have 3/4 of the entire market. And that would be a great solution. Remember, when you choose the targets, you can do a single target or you can do a multiple target. And just remember that you just have to advertise differently for each one, but you can use the very same resources to go after different groups. Yeah, good answer. So yeah, that's what I would do. Now, if I were a corporation who, I was just out of the gate and I didn't have a large staff, I might want to try for one of these other groups and I can hang on a quarter of that. But I have to be very careful also. The worst part about people of what product demonstrations and proactive advice and consulting is many times you can give away the farm before they ever buy it. And I always had that problem when I was a computer consultant, is I like to listen to my own voice and I tend to give away the solutions and they would go buy things somewhere else. I never learned enough to say, hire me and I'll tell you the rest of the story. But you learn or you move on. Okay, so this is an example. This is exactly how you do it. This is how you define it. You make sure that whatever the solution you use is something that is suitable for your organization. Ultimately, hopefully, you should make the right choices and then you can go on and succeed. Personally, with your solution, I'd try both of them at the same time. Okay. So just remember, you've got to recognize the demand for service also reflects their ability to pay for them. And once again, payment is not a service output, but it is something that has to be considered. And it's true that it's very doubtful that any single channel strategy is going to satisfy the needs of every segment. And I also want to say this, the delivery environment, if I have buy online, pick up in store, buy online delivery, order in store delivery, all of those, each of those delivery options usually is there to appeal to a different segment. Just like the Walmart demonstration, the individuals who were driving up to Walmart who didn't want to get out of their car are different from the individuals who drive up to Walmart, go into the store, buy their goods, and leave. You add more service to get more customers. You rarely want to do more than one if you're going after the same customer. All right. Now, one other thing about this that's always difficult is there's the notion of what we call channel pollution. All right. With so many different options now, how do we know what is the consumer's journey. We don't to most aspects. We have a lot of assumptions. And, you know, this is probably not a test thing, it's just a general discussion thing. You know, channel pollution is one of those things we just have to deal with, because once again, the consumers rule. And so we've got to find ways of making best guesses. And we can do a lot of surveys, but the surveys usually require the acceptance of the consumers to give us the answers. So when you say, would you like to take a survey and say, yes, that's really important to us, but we always have the difficulty of something that's known as non-response bias. There is a psychology, oh God, what was his name? Moore's bat. I can't remember it. But anyway, there are two professors from the University of Missouri that came up with a concept is that basically states that the more you know, the greater possibility you don't know. In other words, you don't know all of the things, sounds stupid, that you don't know. That we hit this peak in terms of our knowledge where we believe we know far more than we do. And the best way, if you're any researcher, is always be under the assumption that you don't know enough. And so we do know how consumers get to the market, but we don't know it all. We just try. Non-response bias. We never know what we don't know. So how do we target the end user segments? We chose those two. Well, remember this, that when we target, what we're doing is we're trying to focus on a segment or a segment, two segments or whatever, with the goal of achieving the significant sales and profits we need. The first thing we need to know is that segment attractive? Based upon the resources of our organization, do we right-size our organization to go after that group? Contrary-wise, if we go after a segment that's only 13% of the market, are we generating enough income for our organization to survive? And so this is the exact same example in segmentation, targeting, positioning, and principles. But remember, we're targeting how consumers wish to receive their service outputs. And so we assess how attractive it is. We target that segment. And then we try to customize a channel solution to sell to each targeted segment. And so what I mean by customizing, I'm gonna go back here just for a second. If I'm going after the full service relationship group, same organization, but what I'm going to do is in my marketing communications, I'm going to talk about these things, our training and our support, how responsive we are. Maybe I'll have product reviews and consumer responses, those kinds of things. And then talk about our commitment long-term with the buyers. With this post-sale support group, I'm going to tell them that they have the confidence that we're going to be responsive when the problem comes up and that we're going to be there. And once again, what I might do is have customer discussion that shows that we do those things. Same company, just two different marketable ideas that we use, and that's how you target different segments with the same products. So, assess attractiveness, target the subset, customize each solution. Now, also what this means is that the corollary means you're choosing which segments not to target. Remember this also, that place is the most expensive. They can be costly and hard to manage. And so you as the channel manager are likely to choose an attractive subset. You should. But here's the advantage also if we target just one section. If we use the information on those segments we're working on, we can design new channels and be prepared when circumstances change. Like I talked about, the research on buy online, pick up and score had been around since 2007. Discussion on the omni-channel actually happened in 2007, 2008. And this is when I was writing my paper, does place still have a place in marketing? Little did I realize that there were factors that were going on that were going to make it not only important, but basically take over channels as we have. Channels, by the way, it's always my favorite. Might as well say that. To me, channels is the last great frontier of marketing. We've done product to death. We've done promotion to death. We've done price to death. Place is the last bold new frontier out there. And that's why I'm attracted to it. Okay. So they talk about Fandango. I actually used this yesterday. My girls were going to watch Mean Girls twice. All right. Well, they went Monday. So, and they had so much fun. They watched it again. They were doing lines from the show, so you knew it was good. But exactly as this group, it was targeted for time-constrained moviegoers because I was working on a project at the time. I went online, got the barcode. Makes it that much easier for me. You know, I was there at home while the girls were there. And yes, there's a broad assortment and variety. This is how an example of win-win. This is how a corporation was basically built. Fandango, yeah, is a collection of the 10 largest movie exhibitors in the United States as well. And it works. And how did they develop? They developed out of the service outputs. So yes, this is an idea. It's a real concept and it works and it brings a lot of success. And we're done. We're done for the day. Okay. So Tuesday we'll start on chapter 3. I'm going to talk a little bit about position papers. We're going to move through chapter 3 a little bit slower because there's a lot of stuff to cover in there. So anyway, have a great weekend. I'll see you Tuesday.
Should I say yes? Thank you. I will.